This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome everyone. Let's start the session. I would request everyone to go on mute, and if you will have any questions throughout the session, you can send them through the chat board. My name is Soumya, and I'll be your host for this session. Let me introduce you to Tech Canvas first. Tech Canvas is an IT certification training organization for professionals, wherein we help students to crack their certification exams in first attempt. We are authorized training center for IIB Canada and ISQI Germany. And we are also authorized training partner of PMI Institute for all the project management related certifications. We also have courses, domain courses into banking, finance, healthcare, and many more. So today we will be talking about the planning processes of PMP, and we have with us Janaki Ram. So JD has 15 plus years of experience in the software industry, including roles such as project manager, engineering manager, development manager, and delivery manager. He has end-to-end experience in successfully delivering projects on both predictive and adaptive agile approaches. He is PMP certified, and he is also PMI authorized training instructor. From here, I would request JD to take the session ahead. Thank you all for joining and hope you all have a great session.
Thanks, Soumya. And good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everyone, depending on from where you are. So this is me. I am one of the project management instructors from Tech Canvas. Like Soumya mentioned, I'm a PMI authorized PMP instructor, and I am both PMP and ACP certified. Okay, so who is this webinar for today, right? So for those who are aspiring to become project managers, like if you would like to know what kind of planning activities does a typical project manager do, you'd find this useful. If you are managing projects and you would like to know industry standard terminology, and practices in the planning area of project management, you will find this useful. And uh, if you are aiming to get certified in any of the professional certifications like CAPM or PMP from PMI, these are standard terminology and notation that we'll be using and standard practices. So you would find this very useful for your exam preparation as well. So we'll talk about the planning processes in PMP, right? But let's try to understand what is planning and then go into the actual processes, right? So planning is the process of thinking regarding the activities required to achieve a desired goal, right? There are a couple of terms being used here. The first term is being thinking, right? We are thinking about what are the sequence of activities that needs to be done to achieve a desired goal, right? And what is the goal that we are talking about? We are talking about project goal or project objective, right? If we have a project goal, we would plan for the set of activities that needs to be executed to achieve the goal, if I have to put it simply, right? So there is a thin line of difference between planning and execution. And if we look at the difference, right, in planning we think, and in execution we do, right? And in planning we specify what and how to do, whereas in execution we follow the specification. Now, you might have heard of the terms like technical specification and functional specification. These are typically defined during the planning stage, right? And then the specification is what is used to execute the project, and when you are testing your deliverables you would verify against the specification. We commit during planning, we commit to the customer or we commit to the stakeholders saying that we would deliver certain things in certain scope, in certain timeline, and certain cost, and that commitment we try to fulfill when we are executing a project. So that is a line of difference between planning and execution. Before I proceed, I would like you to memorize one fact in terms of terminology that we use in project management is whenever we use the word baseline, we means we are committing to something. When we say scope baseline, we are saying that this is the scope we are committing to customer that will be delivering them, right? When you are talking about cost baseline, we mean that this is the cost within which we will be delivering the project. So that is the commitment we are making. So this is some notation that you need to understand, right? So what is the agenda for today? The first part, we'll be talking about how planning is done in waterfall methodology, right? The second part, we'll talk about how planning is done in agile methodology when it comes to project management. So what are we going to use as reference for planning in waterfall methodology is our standard PMBOK guide process groups, right? So this is very popular and used widely even today. Your PMBOK guide recommends your project management phases to be divided among these different areas, right? The project initiation, where you actually authorize the existence of a project, where a project manager gets assigned to a project, okay, and the project manager kicks off the project, right? And our focus of discussion today will be around the planning process group. In planning process is what I was talking about earlier, is we think about what and how to do, right? And in execution process is where we actually execute what we have planned for. We do the work, okay? And just for your information, the monitoring and control is to make sure that our plan and execution are in sync, that nothing is getting deviated from plan, and if anything is getting deviated from plan, it should be formally authorized. That is primarily why monitor and control is used. And finally, we close the project once the goals of the project are achieved. So this is the intention of 5 process groups that PMI provides in PMBOK guide. Our focus area would be in the red colored planning process group. Now, if I have to summarize, what are the activities that we do in planning, right? The first line pretty much summarizes all, right? All aspects of plans, we'll talk about them one by one. We would be documenting them. And like I mentioned earlier, we will be committing to customers or stakeholders on what we are delivering, when we are delivering, and within what cost are we delivering, right? There are additional set of deliverables that we have. The work breakdown structure is also defined in planning, and the roles and responsibilities of various team members in your project is also defined beforehand in planning, right? This is very important when you want to make sure there are minimal conflicts in your team, is to define the roles and responsibilities beforehand. Now let's go through the plans one by one, right? So what are the various aspects in project planning, right? We have a couple of aspects. Now the most important is stakeholder management, right? You need to plan how do you handle stakeholders in your project. Now who are stakeholders? Stakeholders are all the people who can impact your project or who will be impacted by your project, right? They may be your customers, they may be your senior management, they may be your own team members or peer project members or you yourself. So there are a wide variety of people we are talking about here. So uh, you need to plan how you manage them, right? And very importantly, scope, right? And in my opinion, a project manager spends most of his time ensuring the definition of scope of what you're delivering, and also making sure that you are delivering all the scope during execution as well. So you need to plan your scope well. Quality, right? And no matter how much effort you spend, if quality is not managed well, then the project takes a backseat. So you need to plan for quality as well beforehand. Cost, schedule. Most of the customers are very much interested on the milestones, right? So there is a question from Dell. Who are the formal, give me a second, let me open the chat. Who are the formal authorities to authorize the changes in project initiation and planning as mentioned in this presentation, right? So initiation and planning, there are two different people who are in total authority. When it comes to initiation, there is a role called project sponsor. Okay, project sponsor has authority to initiate a project. Until then, we do not have a project manager, okay? And or your plans are on the authority of project manager. Okay, the project manager has authority on authoring all the plans. So two different roles for initiation and planning. Okay, schedule, right? Schedule planning is also important because your customer would be interested in knowing the milestones of the project, right? You need to do resource management. You need to plan for resources because resources will cost the project again. You need to plan for procurement if you are going to get in contractors or vendors, or if you are going to get material, equipment, you need to procure them. So you need to plan for procurement. And finally, last but not the least, you need to plan well on how you are going to handle risks when they happen in your project. How do you, on what criteria would you assess the risks? How would you prioritize the risks? How would you respond to the risk? You need to plan that beforehand. So these are the different aspects, and we'll go through them one by one as to what are involved in the planning. First, with stakeholder planning. Right? What do we need in stakeholder planning? We need a list of stakeholders, right? Um, to start with, right? And guideline says, and good recommendation says, the earlier we identify the list of stakeholders in a project, the lesser the risks later in the project. Right? As soon as you initiate a project, you need to have a stakeholder register where you maintain the list of stakeholders. Not only that, you need to also plan how do you engage the stakeholders throughout your project. Right? You might have noticed in your real life experience that not all stakeholders are supportive of the project. Some of them may be against the project as well due to various reasons. It is your job as a project manager to ensure them that all stakeholders are supportive of your project. And for that, you need to have a stakeholder engagement plan. More importantly, you need to have a mechanism to analyze the stakeholders. If I go back to next screen, this is one of the examples of how you can do stakeholder analysis. Right? There are other techniques as well. I'm taking an example here. This is called power versus interest grid. If you have 10 stakeholders, and if you want to know how you are going to engage them differently, you can try to place them in these quadrants. Right? On the y-axis, on the x-axis, you see interest level from low to high. On the y-axis, you see power level from low to high. Right? For example, if my if one of the stakeholders is having high power but low interest in the project, you need to make sure that that particular stakeholder is interested in your project. He doesn't is satisfied with your project, with your deliverables, right? On the other hand, if the stakeholder has high interest and high power, you need to work with him very closely to make sure he's up to date with the project reports, the project status, right? There may be cases where he has low power but high interest. You need to keep them informed, keep them communicated on the project progress. And finally, you may be having some stakeholders who are low power and low interest, right? It's not that we should exclude them from the communication, at least keep them informed and keep monitoring them so that uh, they are up to speed with what's happening in the project. So you may place your stakeholders across various quadrants and then analyze how you are going to engage them constantly throughout the project. This is one of the tools. There are other tools like directions of influence, salience model. You can research, but this is quite effective. Now, next is scope. How do you plan for scope? Scope is very important because scope will define how you are going to cost your project and how you are going to schedule your project. Right. So scope planning is a entry point. Right. You need to have a scope plan. Okay. More importantly, your scope will cover certain set of requirements. Right. A set of requirements makes scope what you are going to deliver. So you need to manage that requirements document, and more importantly, requirements traceability. Right? What do you mean by requirement traceability? Right? If today a customer is giving a requirement, you may be trying to uh, match the requirement or execute and fulfill the requirement as a part of your project execution, and tomorrow a tester might be testing that implementation of yours, and day after tomorrow it may be going to production. But there must be a connection between your deliverable and your requirement. There must be a link how you trace back through all the way, and that's important as a part of your planning, right? Trace your requirements all the way till they are delivered into customers' hands. More importantly, you need to define the acceptance criteria much before, probably during the very importantly during the planning of your project. What is acceptance criteria is typically a customer agrees with you as a project manager and team that this is how he would be testing this requirement, these are the steps, and he agrees with it beforehand, so that when you're actually placing the deliverables in the customer's hands, you and the customer know what to test and how to test, rather than uh, leaving uh, leaving gaps for any slippage at that point of time, right? So again, you can also commit or baseline scope. Scope can be baselined or committed to the customer using two tools called scope statement and work breakdown structure, right? Your requirement that comes from the customer may be a 10-line requirement or one-page requirement, but throughout your planning phase, you would be elaborating the requirement and splitting it into lower level requirements called work breakdown structure. Okay. So this is with scope. More importantly, you will be committing to the customer is the scope statement and the work breakdown structure as a part of your planning at the end of your planning typically, right? Now we need to plan for quality as well, right? And that is typically called quality assurance, right? And how you are going to manage your quality is typically part of quality management plan. What kind of tools and techniques would you use? How much are you going to invest? That is going to be part of cost of prevention, also known as cost of conformance. We'll see an example in next slide, right? So two ways you can manage quality, right? One thing is proactively, that you would say these are the testing techniques I would use to ensure that the quality is up to speed. The second way is very reactive, right? You notice that something is wrong with the deliverable, then you report it and get it corrected and retest it again, right? In planning, you would mostly be dealing with prevention costs or cost of conformance, right? For example, you need to train the people on quality as well, right? If you want to train your development team on unit testing, the best practice of unit testing, the benefits of unit testing, right, and test driven development, those investments go under prevention costs. You need to plan for that. You need to have proper quality standards defined. You need to invest time on that. That is part of your planning, quality planning. Sometimes you need equipment for testing, right? uh, More so relevant for manufacturing projects, you need special equipment for testing. That's an investment that goes to your quality planning prevention costs, right? And then again, finding the right slot to test it, right, depending on the type of project, nature of project, time slot, right? And you need to invest in testing, destructive testing. You will be losing a lot of material in destructive testing, right? In defense projects, we lose a lot of material as a part of testing. That also is an investment in quality. Very importantly, inspection, quality inspection. Okay, so money spent during the project to avoid failures, right, comes under cost of conformance, which you would focus during quality planning. You need to plan for cost because that's where everything drives to finally, right? You would be planning on what kind of estimation techniques that you would use, right? And you need to justify your estimates, right? That's why you have, on one hand, you would document cost estimates, that how much is the cost for the project. You would estimate every individual activity in the project, you will sum them up, and then finally you will come up with a document called cost estimates. And you also need to document something called basis of estimates, like what was the underlying basis on which you came with the estimates. Did you have assumptions, or did you use certain techniques, or did you compare with the earlier activity in a different project? That needs to be documented as well. That is called basis of estimates. You have something called reserves, right? Reserves are, if I have to put a very crude synonym to reserves, it is called backup, I can say, right? Typically projects have risks, right? And you identify them when you're starting risks. Now let's say your project has $1 million as the initial estimate overall that you come up with. Now you may identify risks in your project that may add additional costs, right? Based on your calculation, if that risks come to round about, let's say $100,000, your project budget is considered to be 1 million plus 100,000 is $1.1 million. So reserves are very important at that point of time in project. Whatever risks you identify in the project, quantify that in terms of cost, add it to your estimates, that becomes your project budget. So reserves are also part of your cost planning. And once you have your project budget, so you would also be submitting something called cost baseline, which is typically your sum of estimates plus your reserve, contingency reserve, right? You'll be committing to the customer that my project, I'm coming up with a baseline of $1.1 million, and I would try to achieve the project execution within this cost. Right? So this is what you would be doing as part of cost planning. Now after cost, we have something called schedule, right? This is also equally important what the customer would be coming behind you, right? He's in most of the cases, customers are very interested in schedule rather than cost for obvious reasons, right? So they might be having some competition coming up in market, or they have a deadline for regulation to meet. So many a times they will be more interested in schedule than cost as well. And you need to plan for schedule, right? For that, you need a schedule management plan where you would mention what kind of tools and techniques you would use to develop the project schedule, right? The project schedule is the actual schedule, right? An example of project schedule is your Gantt chart, right? Or your engineering plan, right? Or engineering roadmap or product roadmap. All these are project schedules, right? And one of the tools that you use to develop project schedule is called network diagram. There are many variations of that. This is also sometimes referred to as precedence diagramming model, right? I'll show an example in the next slide. So you need to commit to the schedule as well, right? We have committed to cost. We can also commit to schedule. Now we can say that I can deliver the project by so and so date as a part of my schedule baseline. Yeah, Dell has another question. Is it okay to ask questions during the presentation? If she is, I have another question. If the project milestones change more than once, should the project manager keep the high or low interest stakeholder in loop regarding those changes? Now I'll talk about change management later. I'll answer your question with explanation there. There is a slide for change management. This is a good question, Dell. I'll come back there. Yeah, fine. So as you commit or baseline for cost, we can also commit on schedule and then work reverse from that schedule. Right. Now here is an example of a typical your PMP syllabus network diagram. Okay, where you can draw a sequence of activities based on dependencies. Let's say your project starts here on the leftmost side and project ends here. Okay, and then as you are looking at the dependencies, these are various activities in your project. Okay, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. For ease of understanding, we have put these names. Now these are the activities in your project, and the dependencies here are B can start after A is complete, C also can start after A is complete. So both of them are running in parallel. Likewise, the dependencies are here, D after B, E after C, and F after C. G can start only after D and E are finished. And finally, H can start after F is finished and G is finished. So we have identified dependencies and we have put in these arrow marks, right? So this is called network diagramming model. And then you can see the estimates here below the activity. You see 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, and so on and so forth. If you sum up these, if you sum up these numbers, we have different paths in this project, right? If you sum up these numbers, you typically get the duration of the project from one of these paths, right? So here we see that path number A, B, D, G, H is the longest path. So it has a duration of 4 plus 3, 7, 12, 16 plus 3, 19. So this project is going to run for 19 days or weeks, whatever the estimates are, right? So you would typically baseline this and commit it to the customer that these are the start dates and end dates of the project, and I would be executing within these limits. This is your schedule planning and baseline. Now resource planning, right? So we need to plan for resources because resources are going to cost you as well. Now, not only that, When you say resources, we are talking about people as well, right? When there are people, you would have aspects like interpersonal communication, conflicts, right? You need to plan for those. How are you going to have? How are you going to handle conflicts in your team? How are you going to train them? How are you going to coach them or mentor them? Right? And what is their availability? These resources will have availability. Sometimes you might have borrowed them from another team or resource pool. You need to plan for that as well. So that's why you need a resource management plan, which would tie up all this. You need to refer to the resource calendar. Resource calendar says which resource is available between what date, right? You might have borrowed a resource for a special skill set for your project from another team. Now that team member may be available, but in certain periods of time, you need to plan his work and integrate his work into the actual project plan or schedule, right? So that's why you need a resource calendar. You need to define the RACI matrix, which is nothing but roles and responsibilities in the team, right? Who are responsible for what, who are accountable for what. You need to plan and define this beforehand so that everybody is clear on that. Okay. Um, I thought I heard a question. Never mind. And then there is something called resource breakdown structure, which I'll show in the next slide. You need to plan this beforehand as well. As I mentioned earlier, resources are going to cost your project. You need to plan them well, right? In your project, there are personnel, material, and equipment. Okay. And then what is the roles and what is the org structure of the personnel? Okay. And what are the different types of material? What are the equipment? You may want to list them out or draw a resource breakdown structure like this so you have a holistic picture of the resources involved in your project. And so this is part of your resource planning. Procurement, you need to plan for procurement as well. What is procurement, right? Sometimes you need to get contractors do work for you, right? You may not be able to, your company may not be able to afford to hire a person for a small term assignment or hire a team for a small term assignment. You rather get that work done by a contracting team and then integrate the work with your work and then deliver it to the customer, right? In such cases, you come across procurement where you sign agreements and contracts, right? And so many a times you do procurement with equipment as well, right? For that, you need procurement management plan. And when you talk about contracts and vendors, there will be many people who will be applying for uh, bidding, right? Who will be bidding for the project. Now you need to have a selection criteria defined how we are going to select the vendors. And more importantly, during that vendor selection process, contractor selection process, you would be using certain formal documents called bid documents. Right? You might have heard terms like RFPs, request for proposal, request for quote, request for information, and so on and so forth. All those are called bid documents. You need to plan them as part of your procurement planning. And finally, as I said, last but not the least, risk management. Your project would be having a risk from day one, right? So this is something a project manager would be busy throughout the project with, right? So in risk management plan, you would mention how would you identify risks, how would you analyze risks, right? Quantitatively or qualitatively, and then how would you respond to risks, right? And how do you classify risks? All this will be part of your risk management plan. And where do you store your list of risks? It is a risk register, right? And how would you prioritize the risks? By doing risk analysis. And as I mentioned earlier, every risk comes with a cost, and that cost is typically assigned against something called contingency reserve, right? If a risk that I identified has a potential impact of, let's say, $10,000 on the project, so that $10,000 will be part of contingency reserve when you are typically estimating for the project, right? So you need to identify that impact as well when you are during the project planning stage. Let's see an example of risk register, right? Here is a risk register. It's a list of risks. Okay, you can see the risk mentioned in the first column, the risk description. All right, very importantly, every risk is attributed with probability and impact, right? The higher the probability, the higher the impact, the more important that particular risk becomes. So your risks are prioritized and ranked based on the combination of probability and impact attribute that it has. Okay, you can see the rank being assigned here, right? 50% probability and high impact is given the first rank because that needs to be addressed sooner. And you can identify many ways of ranking your risks, right? Here is one suggestion from PMI is using probability and impact matrix. This is called probability and impact matrix. You can see here that you can have positive risks as well, right? On the left side you have negative risks. A combination of moderate impact and very high probability is giving a score of 0.18. Likewise, very high impact and very high probability is 0.72. The number is higher. So higher the number, the higher the rank, higher the priority, the more importance you will give it to the risk and try to address that risk. So you can use this matrix in your projects and then come up with a prioritized list of risks and go after them in a descending order. Okay, now I'll answer Dell's question, right? So we talked about baseline earlier. Okay, so when I say baseline, I gave you a formula, right? Baseline is nothing but commitment. You are committing to the customers and stakeholders that this is the scope, this is the budget, and this is the schedule I will be delivering the project, right? Now, after you commit, there may be changes further. Let's say you are committed that you are going to deliver 100 requirements. There are every chance that the customer may modify or add 10 more requirements to that, right? So what needs to be done, right? In typical project management, we do something called change management, right? It has to undergo something called change management procedure where it needs to be authorized by a set of people called change control board. Okay, and then you rebaseline, right? You rebaseline and then you continue with your project, right? So any changes after committing should go through a change management procedure. Once baseline changes should undergo change management. Okay, and for that we need a team of people called change control board, right? Typically it contains a project manager, the project sponsor, and SMEs, subject matter experts, right? And very rarely it will contain some customer stakeholders as well, right? So these people will look at every change that is being proposed on top of the baseline, and they would either approve or reject a change, right? And you need to establish a change management process, like how would you, what is a change, and who would approve it, who would reject it, on what basis will should be approved and rejected. All this needs to be defined beforehand. Now if I go back to Dell's question, let me answer pinpoint. If the project milestones change more than once, should the project manager keep the high power? Yeah, so in terms of communication, yes, but the priority for him, right, for the project manager is, if the schedule is getting changed after baseline, as you have mentioned, he for him, before he even applies the new schedule, he needs to make sure that it undergoes the change management process. The change management process, the change control board will review what is the proposed new schedule, what is the impact of it on the cost and the scope. They'll review everything, and then if they find it okay, they will approve, right? Once they approve, he can communicate the new change to all the stakeholders, right? He can even communicate to the stakeholders that this is the request that has come, we are reviewing it. But again, the important thing is it has to undergo change management procedure. Second aspect is he needs to communicate it to the stakeholders based on how you mentioned, based on the power versus interest, right? For high power high interest, he may go and communicate it one on one and ensure that there are no concerns regarding that. So yes, in a way you are right, we can use that and communicate accordingly. Okay, so far we talked about how planning is done in waterfall methodology, right? Let us look at how planning happens in Agile, right? You might have seen a pattern there in waterfall planning, right? So we plan once, right? We plan once and we execute once, right? And then finally we deliver. Okay. Now this may not work in all the business scenarios, right? The nature of work, nature of market may be different for different products and different scenarios, right? Different industries. Now that goes well with traditional projects, but with changing scenarios in market, higher competitions between products and competitors, right? You may want to have a flexible approach as well handy, right? So in agile, planning happens or more or less under the principle called rolling wave planning, which evolved from progressive elaboration, right? If you look at this diagram, on the x-axis we have time, okay? On the y-axis we have different levels of activity, right? Okay. The first wave you see here is initiating the project, right? Now, what you are doing after initiating the project, you are planning first, and you're not planning for the entire scope. You are only planning for the scope that can be picked up immediately or which is of higher importance of priority, right? So we're taking a subset of scope, only planning for that, executing your project for that scope, all right? And then what you are doing is, as that execution is coming to a finish, you are planning for the next subset of scope. Once that is done, you are executing the next subset of scope, and you are repeating this. So you are not planning for the whole. Instead, you are planning for a subset of the overall product that you are delivering, and you are incrementally doing this, right? This is a different approach in comparison with what we were talking earlier. This is called rolling wave planning, and it has come from a concept of progressive elaboration, right? You are elaborating progressively here. Now, if I have to take an example, I'm taking a very crude example here, right? If my project has 100 requirements again, okay, now I may be planning for the first this planning here, it may be only for 10 requirements, and I'm executing those 10 requirements here. The next planning I'm doing for is 12 requirements. I'm executing those 12 requirements here. Likewise, I'm repeating 10, 10, right? And as you are running through, your priorities may change, right? You may shuffle the requirements up and down. You have that flexibility. You did not have that flexibility in the earlier approach that we talked about, right? The waterfall. Now, there's something called planning onion in Agile, right? The shape of onion, different layers, right? When you are starting to develop a product, right, you have something called product vision. Okay? So you have the entirety of the concept that you are having on the product, and you try to define it in a vision, right? Most of the visions are typically in a paragraph, right? But it says what the product is trying to achieve, right? Technically, it's nothing but product scope, right? In a simplistic way, you have product vision. How do you define product vision? Your organizational leaders, they provide product vision, okay, based on what they are expecting from the product or delivering through the product, right? There's something called elevator statement. It is a technique, right, where if you imagine yourself to be left in an elevator for 2 minutes with your company CEO, how would you pitch for a product, right? It should be short, crisp, and effective, right? You can use a technique like that to come up with product vision. Okay. There is a tool called product vision board. We can use that to come up with product vision. And more importantly, once you define a product vision, throughout the course of product development, the leaders like Scrum Masters or even project managers, they constantly reiterate vision to the project team. Okay, so that is product vision. But again, you need to put in action, right? Product vision is just a statement or maybe a paragraph or at best a one-page description of what the product is trying to achieve. That doesn't mean anything for the team members to start developing the product. So the next level of planning is called product roadmap. From the product vision, you'll come up with a roadmap. What is a roadmap? Roadmap is a visual way of depicting what is expected out of product from at what point of time, right? So product roadmap tries to achieve product vision incrementally, right? So your product has features, right? And the features are achieved on timelines. Your product roadmap typically gives that, right? The focus is on features. What are the product features? By when do we need those product features? And it visually shows dependencies between features, and it's very it properly it's a popular way of showing a project plan in agile projects, right? If somebody in agile project, if your management comes to you and asks you where is your project plan, right? And product roadmap is typically shown as a agile project plan. Now, product roadmap is good, but it is a very high level, right? Again, for a Scrum team or an Agile team to implement it, that level of abstraction is not good enough, right? They need further elaboration on the features, right? That is why the next level of planning in Agile is called release planning. In release planning, you have specific milestones, right? At the end of month one, what are we going to release? At the end of quarter one, what are we going to release? So it drills down from feature level to typically stories level, right? And here we have multiple releases in a given year, right? And we try to assign features against releases, right? We also extract stories out of features so that we can estimate them. And this is a more realistic timeline than product roadmap, right? Product roadmap is all about what product is expecting out of based on the market demand for the product, what timeline they're expecting, what feature. Your release plan is defined more on that. Now, is that enough for the team to start working? Not really. Release plan is long term. It talks about what needs to be released in the next 1 month and the 2 months, the 3 months, right? But what the team needs is weekly plans so that they know what they need to do. So next level of planning in Agile is called iteration planning, which is also known as sprint planning. Some of you may be familiar with it. So here we talk about the actual stories that needs to be delivered in the next 1 or 2 weeks. Okay, this is where the team is doing actual project execution. So far, whatever we have been doing is only project planning. In iteration planning is where the team initiates the project execution. Right? So their scope of work is limited to the sprint, what they need to achieve in the upcoming sprint. Right? So number of iterations make a release. Okay, you may have a predefined release cadence in your organization. You may have predefined duration of a sprint in your organization, and you can club them together, and these iterations together make releases, right? And what do you do in iteration planning? We refine the stories, right? If there are any further clarifications needed by the team, the product owner will clarify that and update the story. And team does low level estimation. They create tasks underneath the stories, okay, in terms of hours, duration estimation, right? Planning is more definitive here. It is not uh, it is not a guesstimate here. It is more definitive compared to release planning and product roadmap. And here the team commits what they can deliver in the next 1 week or 2 week, depending on the size of your sprint, right? And from there on, the team's focus would be to meet that commitment or deliverable, right? For standard terminology, this is the baseline. If you have to compare it with waterfall, right? The sprint backlog is the baseline for what the team is going to commit or deliver. Now, is that enough? This is good enough. This is good enough for planning. But if you have one more layer, that will be great, so that you are in better control of your project, and that is called daily stand up in Agile or Scrum, right? So as the name suggests, you do this daily stand up once in a day, okay, and the team members gather together at a predetermined time and place, and then everyone gives their updates to the rest of the team. The update is typically a 3 statement format, right? Everyone talks about what they have worked the previous day, what they are planning to do today, and if there are any blockers or impediments in their work, right? So the focus here in daily stand up is on iteration goals, right? And as I told, everyone gives an update on what was accomplished the previous day, what is planned for the current day, and any impediments or blockers that needs to be taken care of, right? So this is planning onion, very popular in Agile. Now, if you look at the frequency of this happening, right? If you go up the topmost layer of planning, product vision, it is least frequent, and typically product vision happens once in a lifetime of product, or if there is a major change in the behavior of the product, you change the vision. right? Product roadmap, it is, I have seen most of the product roadmaps are planned for 1 year. Okay, again, nothing stopping organizations from using it once in 6 months or once in 2 years, but 1 year is what I have ideally seen in medium-sized product. Release planning happens uh, based on the release cadence, right? If my team has 1 month release cadence, release planning happens at the beginning of the 1 month, right? In that case, it is once in a month. For mature Scrum and Agile teams, they release once in an iteration, so they have release plan part of their iteration planning itself, right? Your iteration planning happens once in a sprint, depending on the size of your sprint, right? And then your daily stand-up happens once in a day, right? If you look at here, the timeline is descending, right? 1 year, 1 month, 2 weeks, and 1 day. Okay, so that way you have better control of what you are committing and what you are executing. So what are the various tools out there? There are a lot of tools that have come very recently. A lot of them are cloud-based, right? But some of the very popular ones that I found useful for waterfall projects, right? Microsoft Project is very useful. It has features like uh, marking dependencies, auto scheduling, right? It also helps you look at the load of your resources and align your resources to reduce the load or increase the load. And then you can also assign cost and look at how the cost is looking at overall project, right? You can schedule end-to-end project here, right? And similar to Microsoft Project, we have one more cloud-based tool called Smartsheet. I have used the online version of it, very similar to Microsoft Project in terms of benefits. Right? I highly recommend that. If you are a small team or a medium team or even large team for that matter, this is very user-friendly in that aspect. For agile projects, Jira and Azure DevOps, both of them are good in planning, roadmap planning, planning for your iterations, right? Tracking releases, mapping releases against deliverables, and both of them come with plugins for you to automate your testing, right? But again, we're talking about planning only here, right? So both the tools are equally good. In fact, Azure DevOps has a good feature for you to track the load of the users when you're doing sprint planning, right? Capacity of the users to be predefined, and then do sprint planning according to the capacity of the team members, right? So these are some examples. Now, what do we do at Tech Canvas, right? So we are a PMA authorized training partner. We are also, I'll answer that in a minute then. We are also IABA endorsed education provider, right? We give training offerings on business analyst certification courses like ECBA, CCBA, CBAP, AAC, CABA, and CPOA, and project management certification courses like PMP. For entry level project managers, we have CAPM and ACP for agile project managers, right? We also give domain trainings, as Soumya mentioned, right? We have question banks for you to practice before you go for your certification exam. We have full length simulation exams. This is good for you to experience the actual exam in terms of duration and complexity before you attend the actual exam, right? And for you to memorize various topics, we have flashcards and crossword puzzles for you, again, when you're preparing for your certification. Now, Dell has a question for waterfall or agile. What is a recommendation to communicate and distribute the status of project? Right, it's a very good question. Right, so traditional waterfall mandated that communication is properly consolidated and communicated to various stakeholders. Right, for example, if I am the project manager, I need to talk to all my team members in project and understand from them the status of their activities, and then then consolidate all the status, make it a project level status, right? It may use Excel sheet or whatever tool you're using. It's time consuming. You have to consolidate it and send it across to various stakeholders, right? What Agile specifies, at the other hand, is something called information radiators, right? Information radiators, right? Here, the idea is to communicate the project progress, okay, uh, very transparently. By transparent, I mean this information is automatically consolidated and then put them across in a place where everyone can see. A project manager or a team member need not spend time consolidating information and trying to send status reports to all the stakeholders. Right? The idea is that everybody should go and see in a certain place where they can see the consolidated information of the project status. One example is burn down chart in Agile. Burn down chart is available for everyone to see. We also have Kanban boards, right? Kanban board is also an information radiator. There is not something that is communicated explicitly to all the stakeholders. These are available for them to see physically or electronically, depending on the nature of the team distribution. Okay, so that's the primary difference. In waterfall, it is very explicit. Okay, in agile, it is very transparent. It is visible to everyone. They can go and look at the project status for communication. Okay, now I'll take some questions from everyone. Welcome, Del. Any open questions that you have for me? Feel free to ask.
Hi, Mr. Janagram. This is Anand. I have a generic question. Will this presentation or this recording be sent to the participants to take a look at it again?
Yes, it is. So, in fact, it will be available in the YouTube channel. It will be uploaded in YouTube channel. We are streaming live now. You should be seeing the video soon after the session is over. You can always come back and watch it.
Thank you.
Welcome. Feel free to interrupt and ask questions while you're thinking about questions. So we have an offering on PMP certification prep course, right? So we cover real life scenarios and class activities. Yes, Abhishek Chandra has a question. Let me quickly go through it. As not an engineering and non-technical from medical says, for almost 9 years, can I go with the certification and can do the career transition? The certification will be available to come out of the sales. So Abhishek, if I understand your question, you're not from engineering background, you're coming from medical sales background. Yeah, of last 9 years, you want to know whether you can do a career transition into this role, right? Okay. If that's the question, you have two options, right? Either, okay, let's consider two scenarios. Do you have project management experience? Okay. If you do not have project management experience, then your direction should be on CAPM certification. Okay, CAPM certification is for entry level project managers, and it gives them enough tools and techniques to learn so that they can go and apply this on their project management role. If you are having more than 3 years of experience in project management, then PMP is the right certification for you that can propagate your career exponentially up. Okay, so you have two choices. If you don't have experience, fine, you have a good choice. If you have experience, even then you have a good choice.
Okay, no, I don't have any experience, as I have mentioned.
Yes.
It's completely from medical sales. So
Yeah.
the thing that you have suggested, go for CAPM certification.
Yes.
So with that, will be able to show my current experience with that certification, so that it will be get counted, or I will be treated as a fresher one only in that
You
project
would,
management.
yeah. So see, this is what CAPM is a certification that will give you project management skills. Okay. So what I've seen,
Yes.
right, in my experience, people who do not have project management experience yet, like your situation, they go for
Yes.
CAPM certification and then they negotiate with their organization saying that they have the skills, they need an opportunity in project management role, and they easily get it because they have the skills, right? But if you don't have the skills, if you go and try to negotiate for a PM role, you may not get it. So this is a good skill for you to negotiate to get into a role.
Okay, and if what for the different organization, not for the current organization, if I can, I will try to some different organization, then what will be the scenario there?
Then
I
yeah,
will be
then if
treated
you,
as a fresher.
you would be treated as a fresher but with skills. That's the difference between you and a fresher. So what you should be targeting is entry project manager role or associate project manager role. So these roles are starting points of project management career, right? So when you are going to another organization, produce a certificate and tell them that you have project management skills, you are looking for associate project manager role, and that would work out for you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Janakiram, this is Shamik.
Sure.
I have
Go
a
ahead.
question. Yeah. So, what is the difference between a project manager and a Scrum Master?
Good question. A Scrum Master is a role in Agile implementation called Scrum, right? Now, if I have to give you a simple answer, Scrum Master is a trimmed down version of Project Manager, right? A Scrum Master is only bothered about the commitments that his team is making as a part of their Agile product development. Okay, whereas the project manager has a larger scope of work, right? He would be dealing with high level project planning. Okay, he will be dealing with cost management, he'll be dealing with schedule management, he'll be dealing with resource management, procurement management. All that aspects I have talked so far in the first half of this webinar today would be applicable to project manager. The project manager is a superset of Scrum Master, whereas a Scrum Master is only having a scope of managing a Scrum team. That's the main difference.
Okay, so in a typical agile environment where companies are following agile methodology, do we see project managers? We just see Scrum Masters.
No, so if you look at product development organizations, right, you have the Scrum team at the bottom, right, and then
Right.
a Scrum Master is taking care of their work. If you look at their org structure, typically Scrum Master may either report to a project manager, right, or many a times they are flavored into engineering manager. End of the day, they are all project managers. Okay, so that's what they do.
Yeah.
Or sometimes what happens is you are a project manager and you may be asked to do role of Scrum Master for multiple teams. That may also happen.
Yes, I've seen that quite often. Yeah.
Yeah. So either ways, project manager has a higher role and responsibility than Scrum Master, and he has wider scope.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure, Shamik. Tamika has a question. I am business analyst, but I have experience with 3 years. Can I do the exam? Tamika, if you are planning to switch your career to project management, if you have that interest and passion towards that as a career path, I recommend you look for CAPM certification. Right? It requires zero experience in project management. Okay, and it will give you a lot of skills for you to manage projects. Okay, and Tech Canvas also gives training on CAPM. Yeah, that's my recommendation to you. Oh, you have managed projects. Is that experience more than 3 years, Tamika? If I take your earlier mentioning, yes, then you are an ideal candidate for PMP. Right, go for PMP, and you might have known. If not, PMP is a leading certification for project managers across the world, right, and across industries and domains. This is recognized across the globe, across industries and domains. So I recommend this for you, PMP.
Yeah, and once again, Abhishek this side.
Sure, Abhishek.
As you have told me that CAPM certifications, and as I am a little bit confused between this project management and the BA certification, that which I should go for to change my career transition and to make my career transition.
Okay. See, both the path are quite
Because I am
rewarding. Okay.
completely as I mentioned.
I know. So both the path are quite rewarding. Okay. Uh, Keep the confusion aside, right? Look, everybody has a career plan, right? uh, 2 years from now where you want to be, or 5 years from now where you want to be, right? So which of these career path is what you are targeting, then it's easy for you to identify. Okay, both are different lines. I can't compare BA certification and PM certification. It depends on
Yes.
where your passion is towards, right, in terms of career plan. But either ways, Tech Canvas also provides training on business analyst certification, right? You have a lot of options there. Rather, I would like to know, where is your interest lying in? Is it project management or business analysis?
No, I've connected earlier also with the Tech Canvas. So I got to know that for me, as I'm from sales only, So
Okay,
for the business analyst, going to
okay.
yeah. So
Let me
that's why I'm asking.
okay, sure. Let me give you quick difference between business analyst and project manager, right? That way you can take a decision, right? Business analyst scope is towards requirements management for a project. Okay, understanding what the
Yes.
business needs and translating it to the project team. That itself is a huge task, right? That is the scope. Project manager is managing the project, right? Planning, executing, and delivering, right? And you have many techniques in that for different types of projects. So both are different, apples to oranges, right? So where you would like to see in
Yes.
5 years, based on that, you need to take a decision. Yeah.
Okay. No, as per my qualification and where I can count my experience at any means, so that can't be treated as a fresher one. So I am confusion between these two.
Okay. Let me put the question this way: do you like leading people, executing projects, planning for projects? Do you like that?
As I have not worked in any project kind of thing, but I am leading a team in
Hmm.
my current organization also and my last organization also.
Okay. Okay. And you did mention that you have business analyst experience, right? Or no?
No, I don't have business analyst experience.
Okay.
I'm having business development manager experience only,
Okay.
completely
Okay.
from sales.
Fine. And what is the size of, what is the duration that you have been leading teams?
It's
How
from
long has
last
it?
8 years.
Oh, that's fine. Then from the way it looks at it, project management is your path because you have been leading people, you might be leading initiatives. That should be your path. That's what I
Okay.
can
Okay.
understand. Yeah. Because leading people is itself a challenge, in my opinion, right? Your PMP exam covers people management and process management. They're given equal weightage, almost equal weightage to both. So you have quite a bit of experience, and that I can see. Yeah.
Yes, and in both of the certification, there is no any issue with the qualifications. There's no need to buy that engineering or MBA. Is this kind of thing something?
Yeah. So business analysis, I cannot speak much about. I'll have a follow-up call with you on the details. For project management, right? If you have been leading initiatives and people for more than 3 years, you are eligible for PMP certification. Applying for PMP certification. Okay.
Okay.
So you have 8 years, which is good enough.
Okay. So means there is no any educational qualification means
Oh,
thing that
educational
that
qualification. Yeah, you need a 4-year recognized degree. Okay. If you
okay.
don't have a degree, if you have a diploma or sorts, you need 5+ years of experience. If you have diploma or something equivalent, right? You need 5+ years of experience. Either ways, you are matching the qualification, irrespective of what. If you have diploma or degree, you are having 8+ years of experience, right? Either ways, you are qualifying for that.
Yes, and I am a BBM graduate, non-engineering, non-MBA. So there is no any issue with
Oh,
that.
nice to know. Yeah, it's clear then. It's pretty straightforward. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome, Abhishek. Anybody else has any questions? Yeah, we are running out of time. So the date that you see on the batch, which is in the upcoming weekend, we are starting a PMP prep course. Okay, you can reach out to us. Uh, as I mentioned earlier, we also do entry-level project management prep courses. In case you do not have experience in project management, you can still reach out to us, and we can schedule a course for you. Over to you, Soumya.
Thank you, JD. This was a wonderful session. And thank you everyone for joining. So as you can see on screen, we are going to start our Feb batch for PMP. So if you want to enroll, you can enroll. And for entry level, there is a great discount that that's going on for Feb month. So, by end of the month, this coupon will also expire. So if you want to get into project management and you don't have an experience, then a CAPM is there for you. So you can join that course. And yeah, thank you all for joining and hope you all have a great day. Thank you, JD. This was a great session. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.